I wiped Ozzy's tears with my trembling fingers, my heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. My son, my precious 4-year-old boy, had a maturity in his eyes that no child should possess. "Papa, it's okay, I'll pretend it's not my birthday," he whispered, his small voice carrying such understanding that my throat tightened with unshed tears. I pulled him against my chest, feeling the weight of my failures as a father crushing down on me. Ozzy had no cake, no presents, no party with friends, singing and laughing. Just one small cupcake I'd purchased from the bakery at a discounted price because that was all my wallet could afford. I was a struggling omega living in a cramped New York apartment where the water pressure barely worked and the electricity flickered whenever it rained too hard. "Baby, I promise your next birthday will be something special," I said, though I knew deep down it might remain just another unfulfilled dream. Ozzy smiled that innocent smile of his and said, "Papa, I'm happy because I have you." That night, after Ozzy fell asleep, clutching his worn toy car against his chest, I stood on our tiny balcony smoking a cigarette, unsuccessfully trying to hide my tears in the smoke. I remembered the day I first held Ozzy in my arms, his tiny breaths, his sweet scent, and then I remembered his alpha father, Harlan Calloway, the most beautiful sin and the most painful memory of my entire existence. Harlan was a billionaire, powerful and completely untouchable, while I was nobody. I never told him about Ozzy because he'd only spent one night with me, then disappeared before sunrise as if I meant nothing, as if our shared moments held no significance whatsoever. But now, 4 years later, I'd heard he was back in New York, and tomorrow I would see him again because my boss had assigned me to handle the catering for his company's executive dinner. My heart pounded with equal parts terror and hope. Would he recognize me? Would he look at Ozzy and somehow know this child was his? Or would he dismiss me again like he did before? I couldn't sleep that night, just watched Ozzy's peaceful face and wondered if everything was about to change. The following morning arrived too quickly. I dropped Ozzy at his preschool, kissing his forehead 3 times like always, then headed to my catering job. My supervisor handed me the address and specific instructions. "This is a high-profile client, Soren. Don't mess this up." I nodded, my stomach twisting into knots. When I arrived at the sleek downtown building and took the elevator to the penthouse level, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The doors opened to reveal a stunning space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. And there, standing near the conference table reviewing documents, was Harlan Calloway. He looked exactly as I remembered, but somehow even more devastating. Tall, with broad shoulders that filled out his expensive suit perfectly, a sharp jawline that could have been carved from marble, and those gray eyes that once looked at me with warmth. Now they were cold and focused on business. "You're from the catering service?" he asked without even glancing up from his laptop, treating me like just another hired worker. "Yes, sir," I responded, fighting to keep my voice steady even as my heart crumbled inside my chest. He didn't recognize me. Not even a flicker of recognition. I spent the entire afternoon in his penthouse, arranging every plate and glass with meticulous care, perhaps hoping he'd finally look at me properly. But Harlan never did. When I was leaving, gathering my equipment, I turned back one last time. He remained absorbed in his paperwork, in his important meetings, as if I'd never existed, as if that night we shared had been completely erased from his memory. Walking home, the rain started suddenly. I got soaked because I couldn't afford a taxi, but I barely noticed. I was already drowning internally in memories of when Harlan wanted me, or at least when I believed he did. When I reached our apartment, Ozzy was sleeping on his small bed, still holding his favorite toy car like it was the most precious treasure in the world. I kissed his forehead and thought maybe it was better if Harlan never knew. If we just stayed in our small world where things were simple. But the next morning, while helping Ozzy get ready for school, he asked me something that stopped my world. "Papa, today is Alpha Day at school. Everyone's father is coming. Will my papa come too?" The hope shining in his eyes nearly destroyed me. What could I say? That his father was such an important man he didn't even know Ozzy existed? That he might never accept him? "Baby, papa is very busy with work today," I said, forcing a smile to hide my breaking heart so Ozzy wouldn't see my pain. Ozzy said nothing, just gave me that heartbreaking smile and went to school. The sadness hidden beneath his brave face tore me apart from the inside. I went to work but couldn't concentrate on anything. That evening when I picked Ozzy up from school, the principal called me into her office. "Mr. Hayes, Ozzy created a drawing today. I think you should see this," she said gently. My breath caught when I saw the picture. Ozzy had drawn a tall, handsome man, strong and impressive, and beneath it in his messy letters he'd written, "My papa who lives in the sky." I held that paper feeling like someone had reached into my chest and pulled out my heart. This was the father Ozzy had never met, who existed in his dreams and imagination, somewhere up in the heavens but nowhere in reality. That night after returning home, I held Ozzy extra tight, wondering how long I could continue lying to him. How long could I protect him from the truth that his father didn't want us? That we weren't dude enough for Harlan Calloway's perfect billionaire life. As I tucked Ozzy into bed, he whispered sleepily, "Papa, do you think my sky papa can see me?" "Always, baby," I whispered back, my voice breaking. "He can always see you." But the truth was, Harlan Calloway couldn't see us at all. We were invisible to him, lost in the shadows of his successful life. And maybe that was exactly where we needed to stay. The following week dragged by, painfully. I threw myself into work, taking every catering job available to avoid thinking about Harlan. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. My boss called me into his office on Friday afternoon and a massive opportunity. "Soren, Callaway Enterprises wants us to handle their monthly executive luncheon. It's a recurring contract worth thousands. You'll be the lead server since you did so well last time." My stomach dropped. Last time? At Harlan Calloway's penthouse. He specifically requested the same team. I wanted to refuse, to run away, but I needed this job desperately. Ozzy's preschool fees were due, our rent was late, and winter was coming. So I agreed, sealing my fate. The executive luncheon was held at Callaway Enterprises headquarters, a gleaming skyscraper in Manhattan's financial district. I arrived early with my team, setting up the elaborate spread in their luxurious conference room. Everything had to be perfect. When the executives started arriving, I kept my head down, focusing on serving food and refilling drinks. Then Harlan walked in, commanding the room's attention effortlessly. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than my yearly salary, his gray eyes scanning the room with authority. Our eyes met for just a second as I poured water into his glass. Nothing. No recognition whatsoever. I was completely forgettable to him. The meeting lasted 3 hours. I stood along the wall with the other servers, listening to them discuss mergers and acquisitions in amounts of money I couldn't even comprehend. Harlan spoke with confidence and intelligence, his deep voice filling the space. Several times I caught myself staring, remembering how that voice had whispered my name in the darkness 4 years ago. After the meeting ended and executives filed out, I began clearing the table. That's when Harlan's phone rang. He answered it on speaker while reviewing documents. "Harlan, darling, dinner tonight?" A woman's voice purred through the speaker. "Not tonight, Victoria. I have work to finish." Harlan replied dismissively. "You always have work. When will you make time for your fiancé?" The glass I was holding nearly slipped from my hands. Fiancé? Of course he was engaged. Why wouldn't he be? Successful, gorgeous, wealthy men like Harlan Calloway didn't stay single, and they certainly didn't remember one-night stands with struggling Omega waiters. I finished cleaning quickly and left before anyone could see the tears threatening to fall. On the subway ride home, I stared at my reflection in the dark window. What had I expected? That Harlan would see me and remember? That he'd fall to his knees and beg forgiveness? I was living in a fantasy while reality crushed me. When I got home, Ozzy was with our elderly neighbor Mrs. Patterson, who watched him after school. "Papa?" he shouted, running into my arms. "I made a new friend today. His name is Marcus, and he has 2 dads." "That's wonderful, baby," I said, hugging him close. "Can I have 2 dads too?" Ozzy asked innocently. My heart shattered again. "Maybe someday, sweetheart." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Harlan's fiancée, about the life he was building that had no room for ghosts from his past. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with an unknown known. "Is this Soren Hayes? This is Amanda from Callaway Enterprises HR. Mr. Callaway was impressed with your service and would like to hire you privately for a charity gala next month. The pay is substantial." I should have said no. Every instinct screamed at me to refuse. But the amount she mentioned would cover 3 months of rent and Ozzy's school fees. So I agreed, hating myself for being so weak. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and avoiding thoughts of Harlan. Then Ozzy got sick with a fever. I stayed up all night with cold compresses on his forehead, singing lullabies and praying he'd be okay. We couldn't afford a doctor, so I did everything I could at home. By morning his fever broke, but I was exhausted. I had to call in sick to work, losing a day's wages we desperately needed. As I held Ozzy while he slept, I looked at his face and saw Harlan in every feature, the same strong jawline starting to emerge, the same gray-tinted eyes, even the same way his hair fell across his forehead. "Your papa would love you if he knew you," I whispered to sleeping Ozzy. "He just doesn't know you exist." Later that afternoon, Mrs. Patterson knocked on our door with groceries. "You look terrible, dear. Let me help. I can't accept." "Nonsense. We take care of each other here." Her kindness made me cry. I was so tired of being strong, of pretending everything was fine when it was falling apart. The charity gala arrived faster than I wanted. It was held at the Plaza Hotel, a glittering event filled with New York's elite. I wore my standard black server uniform and tried to blend into the background. The room sparkled with diamonds and designer gowns, a world I would never belong to. Harlan arrived fashionably late with a stunning blonde woman on his arm. Victoria, presumably. She wore a red dress that cost more than my car and diamonds that could have fed my son for years. They looked perfect to bear, like they'd stepped out of a magazine. I served champagne and hors d'oeuvre, keeping my distance from Harlan. But fate pushed us together when his fiancée requested a specific wine. "Excuse me, could you bring me a glass of the 2015 Bordeaux?" Victoria asked without even looking at me. "Of course, ma'am." When I returned with her wine, Harlan was standing beside her. I handed her the glass carefully, my hands thankfully steady. "Thank you," she said dismissively, but Harlan was looking at me strangely. "Have we met before?" My heart stopped. "I work for the catering company you've hired, sir." "No, before that. You seem familiar." Victoria laughed. "Darling, you can't possibly remember every server we encounter." Harlan frowned but said nothing more. I escaped quickly, my chest tight with emotions I couldn't name. He almost remembered. Almost. The rest of the evening passed without incident. As I was leaving through the service entrance, I saw Harlan and Victoria saying goodbye to guests. She kissed his cheek and he smiled at her politely. They looked like the perfect couple. I walked to the subway station, my feet aching and my heart heavy. Tomorrow I would wake up, take care of Ozzy and continue pretending everything was fine. Because that's what I had to do. That's all I could do. 2 weeks later, everything changed. It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon. I'd taken Ozzy grocery shopping, trying to make it fun by letting him pick out one special snack. He chose chocolate chip cookies, his favorite, and chatted excitedly about his upcoming school field trip to the zoo. "Papa, will you come to the zoo with us?" he asked, holding my hand as we walked down the busy sidewalk, grocery bags in my other hand. "I have to work that day, baby. But I'll ask if I can get time off." We both knew I couldn't afford to miss work, but Ozzy's hopeful smile made lying worth it. We were crossing the street when I heard tires squealing. I looked up to see a black SUV racing around the corner, heading straight toward us. Time slowed down. I dropped the grocery bags instantly and grabbed Ozzy, pulling him against my chest as I threw us both toward the sidewalk. We hit the concrete hard, my elbow taking most of the impact, pain shooting up my arm. Apples and cans rolled everywhere, but I didn't care. My only thought was, "Ozzy, baby, are you hurt? Did you hit your head?" I frantically checked him over, my hands shaking. Ozzy's eyes were wide with fear, but he shook his head. "Papa, I'm okay. You're bleeding." I glanced down and saw blood dripping from my elbow, but it didn't matter. The SUV had stopped a few feet away and I watched as the driver jumped out, followed by someone from the back seat. Harlan Calloway stepped onto the sidewalk, and my entire world tilted. He rushed toward us, his gray eyes filled with concern and something else I couldn't identify. "Are you both all right? I'm so sorry my driver didn't see you crossing." His words died when our eyes met. For several long seconds, he just stared at me and I could see his mind working, trying to place my face. Then his gaze shifted to Ozzy, still clutched in my arms, and everything changed. Harlan went completely pale, all color draining from his face. His hands started trembling at his sides. Ozzy was looking up at him with those big gray-brown eyes, and the resemblance was unmistakable. They had the same shaped eyes, the same nose, the same curve to their lips. Anyone looking at them together would see the connection immediately. "Who is this child?" Harlan asked, his voice barely above a whisper, shaking with emotion. "My son," I said firmly, pulling Ozzy closer protectively. Harlan's jaw clenched, his eyes darting between Ozzy and me repeatedly. "How old is he?" "4." I watched him do the mental calculation, saw the exact moment realization crashed over him. His breathing became rapid and shallow. 4 years ago, the charity gala, the balcony. He couldn't finish the sentence, shock written across every feature. "We need to go," I said, trying to stand up while still holding Ozzy. Harlan reached down to help me, and when his hand touched my arm, electricity shot through my entire body. It was the same feeling from 4 years ago, that instant connection that had drawn us together in the first phase. "Wait, please," Harlan said urgently. "I remember you now. Soren. Your name is Soren." Hearing my name from his lips after all this time made my knees weak. "Mr. Calloway, we're fine. Your driver should be more careful." "Is he mine?" Harlan asked directly, looking at Ozzy with an intensity that frightened me. "Soren, is this boy my son?" Ozzy shifted in my arms, confused by the tension. "Papa, who is this man?" I couldn't answer either of them. My throat had closed up completely. Harlan crouched down to Ozzy's level, studying his face with wonder and devastation mixed together. "What's your name, little one?" Harlan asked gently. "Ozzy," my son replied quietly, hiding his face against my shoulder. "Ozzy," Harlan repeated, testing the name. A single tear rolled down his cheek. "He has my eyes. My mother's nose. Soren, please, you have to tell me the truth." People were starting to stare at us, at the obvious drama unfolding on the sidewalk. Harlan's driver stood nearby, looking uncomfortable. I needed to leave before this became a bigger scene. "I have to go," I said, my voice breaking despite my efforts to stay strong. "No!" Harlan grabbed my wrist, not roughly but desperately. "You can't just walk away. Not now. Not after I've finally found you again." "Found me?" I laughed bitterly. "You've seen me multiple times over the past month, Harlan. At your penthouse, at your office, at the charity gala. You didn't recognize me once." His face crumpled with guilt and regret. "I know. God, I know. And I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But I see you now, Soren. And I see him. Please. We need to talk about this." "There's nothing to discuss," I said, finally managing to pull free from his grasp. "You have your life, your fiancé, your perfect world. We don't fit into that." "My fiancé?" Harlan looked genuinely confused. "Victoria? That's over. It's been over for weeks." "It doesn't matter," I said, though my heart lurched at this information. "Ozzy doesn't need complications. He needs stability. He needs his father." Harlan's voice rose with emotion. "And I need him. Soren, please, I'm begging you. Let me be part of his life. Let me fix this." Ozzy whimpered, overwhelmed by the adult emotions swirling around him. That snapped me back to reality. Whatever history Harlan and I had, Ozzy came first. Always. "Papa. I want to go home," Ozzy whispered. "We're going, baby," I assured him, stepping around Harlan. "Soren, wait!" Harlan called after us. "At least give me your number. Please. I won't give up on this. I won't give up on him." I kept walking, tears streaming down my face. Ozzy heavy in my arms. Behind me I could hear Harlan calling my name, but I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because if I turned around, if I looked at his face one more time, I would break completely. When we were a block away and safely out of sight, I finally put Ozzy down. My arm was still bleeding. My whole body ached, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional turmoil tearing me apart. That night, after putting Ozzy to bed, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Please, Soren. We need to talk. Tomorrow. My office. 2 p.m. I'm begging you. Don't bring Ozzy yet. Just us first. We need to figure this out together." Harlan. I stared at the screen for an hour, my thumb hovering over the delete button, but I couldn't do it, because despite everything, despite all the pain and anger and heartbreak, part of me still loved Harlan Calloway. And worse, Part of me hoped he might actually want us this time. The next afternoon at 2 o'clock, I stood outside Harlan Calloway's office building, my hands drenched with nervous sweat and my heart pounding so violently I could barely breathe. For a moment I considered Nan away, disappearing back into the safety of anonymity. But then I remembered Ozzy's drawing, that picture of his sky father, and I knew my son deserved the truth no matter how painful it might be. When I entered Harlan's office, he stood facing the massive glass windows overlooking the New York skyline. He wore an expensive suit, but his tie hung loose around his neck and his hair looked disheveled, as if he hadn't slept all night. The powerful businessman facade had cracked, revealing something vulnerable underneath. "You came," he said without turning around, his voice thick with emotion. "You asked me to," I replied simply, keeping my tone neutral even though my insides were churning. He finally turned to face me and I could see his gray eyes were bloodshot and red-rimmed. He'd been crying. The realization sent a jolt through my system because I'd never imagined someone like Harlan Calloway capable of tears. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted, his voice raw. "All night I kept thinking about Ozzy. His eyes are my eyes. Soren. His smile mirrors mine exactly. The way he tilts his head when he's curious, the small dimple on his left cheek, they're all mine." "Yes," I confirmed, because there was no point in lying anymore. "Why?" The single word exploded from him with such anguish that I flinched. "Why didn't you tell me?" "4 years, Soren. My son has been in this world for 4 years and I knew nothing. How could you keep this from me?" "Because you didn't care," I shot back, my own emotions breaking free. "You disappeared after that night, Harlan. You left before sunrise without even leaving a note. I didn't ask for your number because I knew exactly what I was to you. Just another one-night encounter you'd forget by Monday morning." Pain flashed across his features, genuine and deep. He moved toward me quickly, and I instinctively stepped back. "That's not true, Soren. I tried to find you. I contacted the gala organizers, checked the guest lists, asked everyone I could think of, but you were there as staff, not a guest. Your name wasn't registered anywhere. How was I supposed to track you down?" His words gave me pause. I had been working that charity gala as a waiter, sneaking moments of fresh air on the balcony during my break. That's where Harlan had found me, where our eyes had met, where everything had started. "If you really cared, you would have tried harder," I said stubbornly, though my conviction was wavering. "I did try," Harlan insisted, struggling to keep his voice controlled. "But then my father had a massive stroke. The company fell into chaos overnight. I had to fly to London to handle emergency mergers that would determine whether we survived or went bankrupt. Everything in my life collapsed simultaneously, Soren. But through all of it, I never forgot you, never stopped wondering what happened to the beautiful Omega who vanished from my life." I fell silent. I hadn't known any of this. The business news from 4 years ago suddenly made sense. The Calloway corporate crisis, the sudden leadership change, the rumors of family tragedy. Harlan reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and cupped my face in his hands with such tenderness that my resistance began crumbling. "Soren, if I had known you were pregnant, if I had any idea about our child, I swear on everything I hold sacred that I would have been there. I would have stood by your side through everything. Every single moment." My throat tightened with suppressed sobs. "But you weren't there, Harlan. When I was alone in the hospital, terrified and in labor with no one to hold my hand. When Ozzy was born and I had to cut his umbilical cord myself because I had no partner, no family. When I got fired from my job for being a pregnant Omega who couldn't hide it anymore. You weren't there for any of it." Tears streamed down his face openly now. "I know. God, Soren, I know, and that knowledge is destroying me. The thought of you going through all that alone, scared and hurting, while I was living my life completely oblivious, it's unbearable. Please let me make it right. Let me meet Ozzy properly. I want to be his father." "He doesn't need you," I said, but the words felt hollow even to my own ears. "Maybe he doesn't," Harlan acknowledged, his voice breaking completely. "But I need him, and I think I need you too, Soren. I always have." That night after returning home, I sat watching Ozzy sleep for hours, wrestling with an impossible decision. Could I really let Harlan into our lives? Could I trust him not to break Ozzy's heart the way he'd once broken mine? What if he got bored of playing father and returned to his billionaire lifestyle, leaving Ozzy devastated? But I also couldn't ignore what I'd seen in Harlan's eyes today. That wasn't casual interest or obligation. That was genuine anguish, real regret, and something that looked dangerously like love. The next morning, Ozzy woke up asking the question I'd been dreading. Papa, that man from the accident, who was he really? I took a deep breath and knelt down to Ozzy's level, taking his small hands in mine. Baby, I need to tell you something important. That man's name is Harlan, and he's your father, your real father, your alpha father. Ozzy's eyes went wide with wonder. My sky papa. He came down from the sky? Yes, sweetheart, I said, managing a smile despite my tears. Your sky papa came down to earth. And he wants to meet you. Will he like me? Ozzy asked with heartbreaking vulnerability. He already loves you, I assured him, pulling my son into a tight embrace. He loves you so much, baby. Later that day, I texted Harlan. Ozzy knows. He wants to meet you. But please, Harlan, don't hurt him. I can survive being broken again, but he can't. His response came immediately. I promise you, Soren. I will never hurt either of you. Thank you for giving me this chance. I won't waste it. As I read his words, I felt the first fragile stirrings of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could build something beautiful from the broken pieces of our past. Maybe Ozzy could have the father he'd died dreamed of. Maybe I could have the love I'd thought was lost forever. But deep down, a small voice whispered warnings. I tried to ignore. Harlan was a billionaire with responsibilities, expectations, and a world so different from ours. Could he really fit into our simple life? Or would he eventually realize we were just complications he didn't need? I pushed those thoughts away and focused on Ozzy's excited chatter about meeting his sky papa. For now, I would let myself hope. For now, I would believe in second chances. For now, I would allow the possibility that love could heal even the deepest wounds. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. But today, I would give my son the gift he'd been wishing for his entire short life. A father who wanted him. Harlan called me every day that week, his voice eager and nervous in equal measure. Please bring Ozzy this weekend. Let me spend time with him. Let me show you both that I'm serious about this. Friday evening arrived with a mixture of anticipation and dread churning in my stomach. Ozzy gripped my hand tightly as we entered Harlan's building, his eyes wide at the marble lobby and uniformed doorman. This world of wealth and privilege was so foreign to us, so far removed from our cramped apartment with its leaking faucet and flickering lights. When Harlan opened his penthouse door, I barely recognized him. Gone was the intimidating businessman in his power suit. Instead, he wore simple jeans and a soft blue sweater that made his gray eyes even more striking. But it was the expression on his face that truly transformed him, pure, unguarded love as he looked at Ozzy. Hello, Ozzy, Harlan said, kneeling down to be at eye level with our son. I'm so happy you're here. I've been waiting my whole life to meet you. Ozzy glanced at me for permission, and I nodded encouragingly. Hi, Ozzy whispered shyly. Harlan's smile could have lit up the entire city. Would you like to see what I set up for you? He led us into the living room, and Ozzy gasped. An entire corner had been transformed into a child's paradise. Toy cars of every color, train sets with elaborate tracks, building blocks, action figures, stuffed animals, and more. It was overwhelming, extravagant, and exactly what a 4-year-old would dream of. Is this all for me? Ozzy asked in disbelief, his voice filled with wonder. Every single thing, Harlan confirmed, and I heard his voice catch with emotion. You're my son, and I want to give you everything. At first, Ozzy approached the toys cautiously, unsure if this was real or another dream that would vanish. But Harlan sat down on the floor with him, genuinely interested in whatever Ozzy wanted to play. They raced cars across the hardwood floors, built elaborate train tracks together, and constructed towers from blocks that they gleefully knocked down together. When Ozzy laughed, that pure, uninhibited sound of childhood joy, I saw tears well up in Harlan's eyes, that he quickly blinked away. This wasn't an obligation for him. This wasn't duty. He was falling in love with his son right before my eyes. Throughout the weekend, I watched them together with a complex swirl of emotions. Saturday morning, they made pancakes in the kitchen, and Ozzy accidentally got flour everywhere, including all over Harlan's face. Instead of getting angry, Harlan laughed and started a gentle flower fight that left them both covered in white powder, giggling like conspirators. "Papa Soren, look! Harlan, Papa is a snowman!" Ozzy shouted with delight. Hearing Ozzy call Harlan Papa for the first time nearly broke me. These were moments I'd never imagined possible, scenes from a life I'd dreamed about but never believed could be real. Saturday afternoon, Harlan took us to Central Park. He'd arranged for a private picnic area where Ozzy could run and play without crowds. We flew kites, fed ducks, and played catch. Harlan was patient and attentive, never checking his phone, never seeming rushed or distracted. For those hours, nothing existed except the three of us. That night, after Ozzy fell asleep in the guest room surrounded by his new toys, Harlan kissed his forehead with such reverence it made my chest ache. "He's perfect," Harlan whispered. "Soren, he's absolutely perfect. Thank you for raising him so beautifully." Later, we stood together on the balcony overlooking the glittering city lights. The silence between us was comfortable now, no longer filled with accusations and pain. "Thank you for being strong enough to do this alone," Harlan said quietly. "Thank you for protecting him, loving him, and becoming the amazing father he needed. I know I don't deserve either of you, but I'm grateful beyond words that you're giving me this opportunity." "I didn't have much choice," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "You had every choice," Harlan countered gently, taking my hand. "You could have given him up for adoption. You could have terminated the pregnancy. But you chose to keep him, to do for him, to sacrifice everything for him. That makes you the bravest person I've ever known." I tried to pull my hand away because the intensity of the moment was overwhelming, but Harlan held firm. He stepped closer, and I could smell his cologne, sandalwood, and cedar, the same scent that had haunted my memories for 4 years. "Soren, I hurt you terribly. I abandoned you when you needed me most, even though I didn't know what I was doing. Please let me spend the rest of my life making amends. Let me be there for Ozzy. Let me be there for you." "It's not that simple," I protested weakly. "Why not?" he challenged, cupping my face in his hands. "Because I still love you." The confession burst from me before I could stop it. "And I'm terrified that Ozzy will get attached, that we'll both start believing in this fairy tale. And then they'll realize we don't fit into your world. You'll go back to your real life, and we'll be left broken all over again." Harlan pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could feel his heart beating against mine. "I'm not going anywhere, Soren. This is my real life. You and Ozzy are my real Leo. Everything else is just noise." I let myself cry then, releasing 4 years of pain and loneliness and fear into his chest. He held me through it all, whispering promises and apologies and words of love that I desperately wanted to believe. Sunday morning arrived too quickly. I woke to find Harlan already in the kitchen making breakfast while Ozzy helped enthusiastically, creating more mess than actual food. They were laughing together, completely absorbed in their task. Then Harlan's phone rang. He answered it on speaker since his hands were occupied with pancake batter. "Hello, Harlan, darling." A woman's voice purred through the speaker, sweet and familiar. "I'm back in New York. I heard you're here too. We should meet for dinner tonight. I've missed you terribly." The coffee cup in my hand froze midway to my lips. That voice, that casual intimacy, the endearment. Harlan's eyes shot to mine, panic flashing across his face as he quickly took the phone off speaker and stepped into another room. But I'd heard enough. The woman, whoever she was, clearly felt entitled to his time, his attention, his affection. All the doubts I'd been suppressing came flooding back. Of course there was someone else. Of course Harlan had a life that didn't include us. How naive I'd been to think we could actually work. I set down the coffee cup carefully, my hands shaking. "Ozzy, sweetheart, we need to go home." "But Papa, we're making breakfast." Ozzy protested happily. "We can finish breakfast at home," I said firmly, gathering our things. Harlan emerged from the other room just as I was putting Ozzy's jacket on. "Soren, wait, please let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," I interrupted, unable to meet his eyes. "This was a nice weekend, but we both knew it couldn't last." "Come on, Ozzy." "Soren, that was Victoria, my ex-fiancée. It's not what you think." But I was already heading for the door, my vision blurred with tears. Ozzy was crying now too, confused and upset by the sudden change. Behind us I could hear Harlan calling my name, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop, because if I looked back, I would shatter completely. The days following our abrupt departure from Harlan's penthouse were the darkest I'd experienced in years. I ignored his constant calls and texts, each message more desperate than the last. Ozzy cried himself to sleep every night, asking why we couldn't see Harlan Papa anymore. My heart was breaking watching my son suffer, but I convinced myself I was protecting him from worse pain down the road. "Papa, why did we leave?" Ozzy asked on Monday evening, pushing his dinner around his plate without eating. "I thought Harlan Papa liked us." "Sometimes adults have complicated situations, baby," I explained weakly. "It's better if we keep things simple, just you and me like before." "Because that lady called him?" Ozzy asked with the unsettling perceptiveness children sometimes possess. "The one who said darling?" I had no good answer, so I stayed silent. Ozzy abandoned his dinner and retreated to his room. Through the thin walls I could hear him crying, and the sound lacerated my soul. What had I done? In trying to protect us both, had I actually caused more damage? Tuesday night around 9 o'clock, someone knocked on our apartment door. My heart leaped with irrational hope. When I checked the peephole, Harlan stood there soaking wet despite the fact that it wasn't raining. His hair was plastered to his head, his expensive clothes drenched, and his eyes looked wild with desperation. "Soren, please," he called through the door. "Please let me explain. Don't shut me out like this." I shouldn't have opened that door. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to leave it locked. But my heart overruled my head, and I found myself turning the deadbolts. Harlan stumbled inside, water dripping onto my cheap linoleum floor. "Thank you," he gasped. "Thank you for letting me in." "Why are you soaked?" I asked despite my anger. "I walked here from my office, in the rain." "Well, there wasn't rain, so I stood under a fire hydrant some kids had opened. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just did to see you." "You're insane," I muttered, grabbing a towel and throwing it at him. "Insane about you," he agreed, not bothering to dry himself off. "Soren, please listen. Victoria is my ex-fiancée. We were engaged 3 years ago, before I ever met you. I broke it off because I couldn't marry someone I didn't love. She's been trying to reconcile ever since, but I've told her repeatedly that it's over." "She called you darling," I pointed out bitterly, "because she refuses to accept reality." Harlan's voice rose with frustration. "Today I met with her face to face specifically to end this once and for all. I told her I've found my mime. I told her about you and Ozzy. I made it absolutely clear that there's no future for us." "I don't believe you," I said, though uncertainty crept into my voice. "Men like you don't end up with people like me. You'll realize eventually that an omega single father with no money and no status doesn't belong in your world." Harlan pulled out his phone with shaking hands and showed me his recent messages. There, in black and white, was a text exchange from earlier that day. "Harlan, Victoria, I need you to understand this is final. I'm in love with someone else. I have a son. My family is my priority now. And you're not part of it. Please respect my decision and stop contacting me." "Victoria, you're making a huge mistake, Harlan. That Omega is using you. He trapped you with a child." "Harlan, don't ever speak about them that way again. This conversation is over. Lose my number." My hands trembled as I read the exchange. "You told her about us?" "I told everyone who matters," Harlan said intently, stepping closer. "My board of directors, my family, my friends. I'm not hiding you, Soren. I'm not ashamed. I'm proud to tell the world that I have a beautiful son, and that I'm in love with his incredible father. But your reputation, your business relationships, mean nothing compared to you," Harlan interrupted. "I've spent 4 years trying to fill the void you left in my life. I've dated, I've gotten engaged, I've thrown myself into work. Nothing helped. Because what I needed was you. What I've always needed was you." "I'm just an omega," I whispered, all my insecurities pouring out. "I have nothing to offer you. No connections, no wealth, no social standing. Your world will never accept us." Harlan took my face in his hands, forcing me to meet his eyes. "Then I'll leave that world behind. Soren, you and Ozzy are my world now. You're all that matters. If Faith has a problem with that, they can all go straight to hell." At that moment, Ozzy's bedroom door opened. He stood there in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes sleepily. Harlan Papa, you came back. Harlan immediately crossed the room and knelt down, pulling Ozzy into a gentle hug. I'm so sorry I made you sad, buddy. I promise I'm not going anywhere ever again. I'm going to be here for you always. Is that okay? Promise? Ozzy asked, extending his tiny pinky finger. Promise. Harlan agreed solemnly, linking his much larger pinky with Ozzy's. Then he looked up at me, extending his other hand. Both of you. Forever. I took his hand, and the three of us came together in an embrace that felt like coming home. All my walls, all my defenses, finally crumbled completely. Maybe I was a fool for believing again. Maybe I'd regret this, but looking at Ozzy's radiant smile and feeling Harlan's arms around us both, I couldn't bring myself to care about maybes anymore. That night, Ozzy insisted we all sleep together. He positioned himself in the middle of my small double bed, with Harlan on one side and me on the other. It was cramped and uncomfortable, but it was also perfect. For the first time in 4 years, I felt complete. The next morning, I woke to find Harlan already up, attempting to make breakfast in my tiny kitchen. He was terrible at it. Burnt toast, scrambled eggs that were somehow both runny and overcooked. But he tried with such earnest determination that I fell in love with him all over again. Good morning, he said when he noticed me watching. I was trying to surprise you with breakfast in bed, but I think I've created a disaster instead. It's perfect, I assured him, meaning it completely. After we ate the terrible breakfast together, laughing at Harlan's culinary incompetence, he stood up and reached into his pocket. My breath caught as he pulled out a small velvet box. Soren Hayes, he began, his voice thick with emotion as he opened the box to reveal a simple but beautiful ring. Will you marry me? Will you let me be Ozzy's legal father and your husband? Will you give me the chance to spend the rest of my life proving that I'll never leave you again? Tears streamed down my face as I nodded. Yes. Yes, Harlan. I'll marry you. He slipped the ring onto my finger, then pulled me into a kiss that felt like a promise, a beginning and a forever all at once. Ozzy woke up just then and started cheering, even though he didn't fully understand what was happening. Are we a real family now? Ozzy asked excitedly. We were always a real family, Harlan said, gathering us both close. But now it's official. The following months transformed our lives completely. Harlan insisted we move into his penthouse, though he respected my need to contribute, helping me expand my catering business into something successful. We had a small wedding ceremony with only close friends and Harlan's supportive family members who welcomed Ozzy and me with genuine warmth. When Ozzy's 5th birthday arrived, it was everything his 4th birthday hadn't been. A huge cake, countless presents, and most importantly, both his fathers celebrating with him. As we sang happy birthday and watched Ozzy blow out his candles, I caught Harlan's eye across the table. Thank you, I mouthed silently. Thank you, he mouthed back, squeezing my hand. We both knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges, judgment from some quarters, and adjustments to make. But we also knew we'd face everything together, as a family, as partners, as forever. Because sometimes love gets a second chance. And this time, we weren't letting go.